The member from Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, this weekend I received a letter from a senior named Clarence Bax. Mr. Bax lives in Sault Ste. Marie, and he and 31 of his friends and neighbours are facing a 31% increase in their rent. Wow. Does the acting Premier think it's fair that a senior like Clarence, living on a fixed income, should be subject to a drastic increase in his rent at the drop of his landlord's hat?
Acting Premier.
Minister of Housing, Mr. Speaker.
Housing.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the NDP for that question. You know, Speaker, it's absolutely unacceptable that so many Ontarian tenants are faced with housing costs that are rising so dramatically, and that's why we're already developing a plan to address unfair rises in rental costs right across Ontario. Speaker, in the coming weeks, we're going to be rolling out our plan for substantive rent control right here in Ontario. It's going to be a very broad package of changes that will protect tenants. We've been working on legislation since last June. It's important that we get it right. Mr. Speaker, we've already taken, as I said in a previous response, we've already taken a whole host of things in regards to action. We've introduced secondary suite legislation. We've introduced inclusionary zoning. We've frozen municipal property tax on apartments. We've doubled the maximum refund for first-time home buyers. We're continuing to collect data to better understand housing needs right here in Ontario. And we're working with.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, again to the acting Premier, and I quote, "We are all senior citizens living on a fixed income and are faced with the problem of where the funds will be coming from to pay this substantial rent increase," Mr. Bax wrote in a letter that he sent to Premier Wynne. Last week, the Premier and her Liberal Party voted against my bill, which would have closed that loophole now that allows these devastating rent increases. Will she change her mind now? Will the government change its mind?
Thank you, Minister.
They had the chance, they didn't do it.
Well, thank you, Speaker. As I said before, I outlined a whole host of things that this government has already put in place. I've talked repeatedly about the broad package of change that we're going to be moving ahead in the days and weeks ahead, Mr. Speaker. And you know, the Premier and I both have been exceptionally clear that we're moving forward with a plan to address unfair increases in rental costs. The NDP know that, Speaker. The NDP know that. We appreciate that they are on the same page when it comes to helping families who are feeling the pinch. But, Mr. Speaker, our plan will go further. It will address a whole host of issues around tenant rights. Simply addressing removal of the rental cap, Mr. Speaker, is a good first start.
Answer.
Our plan will do that, and it will do more.
Final supplementary.
Yeah, if you want to be on the same page, act now. Pass it now. These seniors need the Premier to act, and they tell her so in their letter. Quote, "We're asking you to support Mr. Tabuns' Bill 106, which would eliminate the dramatic rent increases we and 150,000 Ontarians are facing," they said. Will the Premier put aside partisanship, put the interests of Mr. Bax, his friends, and thousands of other Ontarians who are facing unfair rent increases? Will she put their interests first and agree to pass my bill today?
Thank you, Minister.
Well, thank you again, Speaker. You know, Speaker, what the NDP put on the table in that private member's bill was pretty thin gruel when it comes to addressing the needs of Ontario renters. It's you know, dare I say, a one-trick pony. Yeah. I will say again, what we're bringing forward in the coming days and weeks ahead, Mr. Speaker, will be a more robust rent control, more robust legislation regarding the Rental Tenancy Act. We heard time and again, Mr. Speaker, as we travelled across Ontario, what is bothering tenants, some of the issues facing landlords. Our changes are going to address a whole host of those things, you know. It's wonderful to hear the NDP standing up for seniors, but I want to remind you that they didn't even mention the word poverty.
The member from Hamilton East Stony Creek, come to order. Wrap-up sentence.
Thank you, Speaker. The NDP didn't even mention the word poverty in their last election platform.